Mr. Reynolds, you're in the lead, so pick the category. I'll take visual novels for 200, Trebek. Visual novels for 200. This visual novel features historical and legendary heroes fighting to obtain the Holy Grail. Oh god, no. Mr. Connery, I beg of you, please answer the question seriously. I will, Trebek, I will. I've learned my lesson. What is Fate's Stay Night? You actually answered correctly, Mr. Connery. I can't believe I Fate's Stay Night at your mother's, Trebek. Oh god damn it. I had an H scene with your mother, Trebek. People love Fate's Stay Night. It's one of the most popular visual novels ever made. It's spawned a franchise of infinite Fate spin-offs that Nasu keeps making instead of fucking Red Garden or Mihoyo 2. I wouldn't be surprised if FSN is the most popular traditional visual novel because there's no way it's more popular than like Danganronpa. Though Fate Grand Order is pretty big, man. I don't know. But there's one aspect of Fate's Stay Night that gets labeled as pointless or poorly written, and that the subsequent removal of these scenes in the remasters often gets praised or at least seen as a lesser evil. Of course, I'm talking about the sex scenes, or I guess H scenes is what they're called in VNs, which I didn't understand until I realized, oh yeah, H, hentai, yeah, it makes sense. Over my short time of being a fan of Fate's Stay Night, I've seen my fair share of criticisms of these H scenes. Shit like, they come out of nowhere, they're extremely poorly written, they're pointless, and while I agree with some of it, I think some of these criticisms are extremely short-sighted. So fuck it, I'm here to tell you why fucking in Fate is peak fiction. Let's start off with a real personal, pretentious-ass reason. Truthfully, unless you think exactly like me, you won't agree with this. And even if you do, it probably won't convince you. But anyways, first we must start off from the basis that Fate's Stay Night is a work of art. Now I know many people struggle with considering video games, especially Eroge games, art, since people are prudish as shit. I would say nowadays, but it's pretty much always been like this. But we're all pretentious visual novel fans here, right? We can call Fate's Stay Night a work of art, right? Alright, good. Well, when it comes to art, I'm a purist. I'm a sub over dub watcher, not because I love Japanese or some dumb shit like that. I just literally watch everything in VO. Everything from anime to Yugoslavian war films. I'll watch in VO. What I'm trying to say is that I enjoy experiencing art in its original form. If an author reveals that his work was censored, I'd of course want to experience the original version. However, Fate's Stay Night is the opposite example, where suddenly the author decides he doesn't want any fucking in his Eroge game. Whatever the exact rationale is, I genuinely don't give a shit, because I kind of take the stance of death of the author with this type of stuff. FSN was written around fucking, whether Nasu liked it or not. All the new scenes, in my opinion, feel way more awkward and stupid, because now we have to give some stupid-ass reason for them to cuddle and do slightly sexual things, or I guess with Sakura, become a vampire and drink blood, instead of, just fucking, like normal couples in a normal romance. Whether you like the scenes or not, they're a part of FSN. I believe in taking the good with the bad. Sex is a part of Fate. Fate is originally an Arrow game. You're losing part of its identity. This is not to say I'm mad at people who played Remastered and that they need to go back and read the H scenes. It's not essential, but I do believe if you want to experience all of FSN, you should engage with the original product, that being an Arrow game. This all leads into a general discussion about remakes and remastered is very complicated and being discussed 24/7 on Twitter anytime someone utters either the words reload or FES. However, I will at least say this. I have no issues with the removal of H scenes in Tsukihime, A Piece of a Glass Moon, because Tsukihime Remake is not attempting to be a replacement of Tsukihime. It is its very own thing, in that sense remakes similar to that of Scarface 1983 or Apocalypse Now 1979. I respect these types of remakes far more, because they attempt to reinterpret the story while keeping the core. These types of remakes will never replace the original, but they can certainly surpass it. I've heard very good things about Tsukiri, even though I haven't personally played it to confirm that. Realta Nua and Fate Stay Night Remastered are not even remakes, they're just censored versions of the original with voice acting and the last episode. Which I do really like, but shut up. And I do not like art being censored, even if it's the very artist doing so. You know, death of the author. For that reason, Fate Stay Night Remastered, to me, will forever be a slightly mangled version of the original. And I really do think it sucks that the uncensored original is generally starting to get quite hard to find. Now that we got all that pseudo-intellectual bullshit out of the way, we can actually defend the scenes themselves and talk about romance and sex and shit. Yay! The very first thing I was engaged with is the idea that they're either pointless or come out of nowhere. This take genuinely makes no sense to me. It sounds like someone played Ultimate Edition and only saw the first sex scene of Fate Route, where they do the three-way in the abandoned building, and then turned sex scenes off. Because almost all the others clearly do have a point and don't come out of nowhere. There's an exception, Heaven's Field. Shout out to the three-way though, it clearly has a point. Being fucking hilarious. If you turned H scenes off after seeing that, you know what, you're a bitch, they're so funny. Moving on, let me claim something to start off. At their core, each Route of Fate are all slightly different genres. Heavens feels a soap opera with its big, heavy, emotional, sometimes over the top, scenes and story. Unlimited Blade Works is sort of an action drama, being the route with the most, hype moments and aura, I guess, or having its own set of grandiose drama. And finally, Fate Route is the simplest, as it is at its core a romance story. However, truthfully, all three of these routes heavily feature romance as a topic, since you know, it is an Eroge game. The reason why Fate Route stands out, mostly as a simple romance story, is because low-key Unlimited Blade Works is about Archer, and because how vast and crazy Heaven's Field gets. And also because Heaven's Field's about Kirei. He's so trip. And admittedly, I think this is a controversial take, but Fate Route is by a decent margin, not a huge margin, but a decent one, my favorite route in the game. And it's because, in my opinion, it nails the romance between Shiro and Saber. Fate Route dick riding aside, with me establishing that FSN is in fact a romance story, let's engage with the idea that these scenes are pointless. This is so odd to me, because y'all know that people in romantic relationships fuck, right? Before we get into this, yes, let me acknowledge that asexual relationships do exist. However, these are clearly not asexual people. Sex, narratively, is the climax, haha funny pun, of the relationship between Shiro and Rin and a major point forward for Shiro and Saber. Sakura is different because sex in that route takes a different purpose that we'll talk about later. Sex in Fate is not just a thing that couples do, which would be enough, to be honest. It is a symbolic union of body and soul. Consensual intercourse in the case of FSN and many other stories signifies an acceptance of the other, not just physically but emotionally. This is generally the only purpose of the three-way in the Fate route besides being peak comedy. Fate Route showcases sex once as a means to an end, and secondly as something more truly romantic, making the difference a second time around more meaningful. Quick editor's note, here I bring up the theme of mind, body, and soul, or just body and soul here, but I add mind later, which I repeat many times throughout the review. I realized I haven't really explained it enough, so here's my CL Sensei lesson. When I say the union of mind, body, and soul, I mean this. The union of mind is the consent, but also how they feel each other's emotions and lust. They combine not just physically, but begin to share their thoughts. The union of body is pretty easy to understand, it's just physical. As the two melt into one, they almost combine. And finally, the union of souls is a lot stranger and harder to explain because the soul is very subjective, but I see it as a union of their destiny. They've accepted each other emotionally and physically and tied themselves together. This physical, emotional, and beyond, mind, body, and soul, connection is symbolized through the literal acceptance of the other's body through sex. Alright, CL Sensei over. Unlimited Blade Work doesn't have two H scenes, but the one it does have signifies a tumultuous beginning to a new relationship. Honestly, I do have my issues with Unlimited Blade Work's H scene, but whatever. It does feel better after Hollow Ataraxia. I also want to discuss in further depth the idea that they come out of nowhere. And besides the point I made earlier about seeing the three-way and turning off H scenes, there's another reason why I think people say this. Oftentimes, I think many focus on the function of the sex. See, Nasu introduces sex as a way to transfer magical energy or some dumb shit like that. People see this and say, oh, Nasu just needed an excuse for them to fuck. And I like to say, please look beyond the functional purpose of the fucking and look at the emotional purpose we talked about earlier. Let's take the example of Unlimited Blade Works. Rin and Shiro fuck right before going to take on Gilgamesh. There's a functional reason for this. Rin needs to link Shitro to her so that he can reality marble and bitch the golden boy. However, beyond this, I think there's a more important reason for them to fuck. This is potentially the last chance they'll get as a couple to do this. They're going to fight Gilgamesh, the strongest servant, and try to pull Shinji out of the Holy Grail. It's very likely one of them will die. So while this sex scene marks a new start for their relationship, it also could have been the last chance they got to share body and mind and soul as one, to embrace, like the song that plays over the sex scenes, wow, each other. If you think about it that way, I don't see it as an excuse for a sex scene. I see it as Rin nervously trying to make an excuse to make love, which is what the game pretty much directly says in the preamble, so yeah, I don't know, man. Fate Route is very similar in this way. Saber and Shiro have just gone through some of their most intense emotional highs and lows throughout the day. From the day to their fight on the bridge to the fight with Gilgamesh, they've both been emotionally strained but brought together. Both have truly fallen for each other. I know they won't get many other chances to do this. Saber meekly gives a functional reason, but truthfully they fuck for an emotional one. Both Shiro and Saber know this. In fact, especially Saber knows this, being the reason why she ends up just for this one night opening up. And here I like to switch to another section I call I'm gonna be showcasing my Fate Route bias here because the section is all about Saber and Shiro's character development throughout the route. Let's talk about Saber and that little fucking bastard Shiro. How I hate him and his stupid hero antics. I assume we all know the story of Victoria Pendragon and Fate, right? I don't gotta talk about that because I just want to focus on Fate Route here. Saber and Shiro are ultimately similar people. That's what makes that scene on the bridge where Saber says she thought Shiro would understand so impactful. They both lack an ego. They fully prioritize someone else's happiness over their own. This is shown through many scenes where Shiro says that Saber's smile brings him joy, and then Saber turns it around and says Shiro being happy brings her joy, yada yada, who gives a fuck. There's like a bunch of scenes like this. There's even a bunch of that in Ataraxia. We also see this through Saber's protection of Shiro as a servant, which while partially motivated by the want for the Holy Grail, is also motivated by her want to protect people. Saber takes this to the extreme through her devotion to her kingdom, which eventually fell after her death. For this reason, Saber wishes for the Holy Grail in order to pick a better king, one that wouldn't fail like her. By doing so, Saber promises to become a heroic spirit and also attempts to erase herself from history. Essentially, she's sacrificing herself. Saber's undying devotion could be called noble, but also childish, naive, and full of self-loathing. She cannot accept the past, her failures and successes, or herself, so she childishly attempts to change the past and erase herself. A suicidal, honestly, pussy way out. Girl doesn't know that Britain doesn't need saving. We need saving from Britain. Fucking British imperialism ruined the world. Just look at the fucking state of it. Shiro is in many ways similar. In order to become a hero of justice, he is sacrificing himself. His own desires are meaningless. He only wishes to save people. He fully embraces Kuritsuko's dream in order to be able to accept himself after the trauma of the fire that left only him alive. He suffers from survivor's guilt, and as we observe through Archer, this attitude is self-destructive and will eventually lead to his own disillusionment and self-loathing. Shiro's lack of ego hasn't reached the level of Saber, who is somehow a 35-year-old woman despite constantly acting like a teenager of very much Shiro's age, due to less time to develop these feelings of self-loathing. But clearly, he eventually does. And similar to Saber, Archer attempts to erase himself. What Fate Route's romance does beautifully is show how these two similar souls complement each other. In Unlimited Blade Works, Rin more or less attempts to fix Shiro for him to overcome his trauma and be able to live as a human being. Rin, a person who is kind, but is also forceful, and has an ego, through love and romance, saves Shiro from the path of Archer. However, in Fate Route, both Shiro and Saber are sick. Shiro attempts to save Saber without knowing he needs saving himself, and Saber rejects Shiro's help, recognizing that he needs saving, but unable to drop her own pride as a king that makes her blind to her own plight. What happens is that, in a sense, through their undying devotion to each other, they save each other. If Shiro can't care for himself, Saber will for him, and vice versa. They each gain a reason to live beyond their attempts to be heroes, an egotistical reason to live, for one another. And now bring it all back in discussion about H scenes, because the second Saber H scene represents this perfectly through sex. Boom! Let's talk about fucking. Okay, so I'm gonna need y'all to understand what sucking dick and what cunnilingus is. If you know anything about these sexual activities, you would know that these are activities which prioritize the pleasure of the one receiving the head / getting their pussy eaten out. The person doing the sucking or going down under might enjoy it, but the point is to pleasure the other. So why am I saying this? This is because of how the actual scene plays out and how it ties into their characters. The 8th scene starts with a sort of nervous interaction between the two. It's really cute. It also reinforces Saber's attempt to run away from her emotions, as she initially tries to frame this as sex for the functional purpose of recharging her magical energy. However, throughout the scene, and even with the line, "I would like to see you naked," she contradicts herself. But anyways, the sex actually begins with Saber once again prioritizing someone else over herself by sucking Shiro's dick. Shiro genuinely attempts to resist his own pleasure, for a mix of reasons. Partially because he doesn't want to defile Saber, but also because even though he doesn't acknowledge or know it, he's also rejecting his own pleasure the way Saber does. What he truly wants to do is make Saber happy. In that sense, Shiro is a hypocrite when he criticizes Saber. In another sense, however, he might be the only person that can save her. So, to please the girl he loves, he switches the situation around. This time, Shiro becomes a cunning linguist and goes to the land down under, a place famously colonized by the very Brits Saber loves so dearly, thus pleasuring Saber. And just like him, Saber at first struggles to accept pleasure. When someone struggles to love themselves, they will struggle to enjoy their very own pleasure. As Shiro continues, she begins to enjoy it. Through each other, they can accept their feelings of joy, because each of them take pleasure in the other's pleasure. This symbolically comes together with them getting this foreplay done with and actually fucking. Saber only truly orgasms, and Shiro feels the maximum pleasure as they bring themselves together, as they embrace. Even as they join together, they prioritize the other. As Saber says, Shiro is kind, so she wants to be kind to Shiro back. They join together, body and soul. While separately they fight their feelings, together they're united as one and can love themselves and one another. Because unified, Saber and Shiro are complete. Saber says, please come together, because it is only together can they have a will, an ego of their own. That's what makes this scene genuinely fucking amazing, despite a few issues. And what I think is great is that Unlimited Blade Works reinforces this scene. As much as Shiro's own lack of self-love is simply applied, or more so a small part of Fate Root, while Unlimited Blade Works fully explores it. The small little scene afterwards shows both hope for the relationship, but also that Saber is still holding back. She says that magical energy restoration has been complete, but it clearly meant more for her. When she says she wishes to sleep together, or when she says that tomorrow they'll go back to their old selves, she's implying that the Artoria of this night isn't the very same Artoria as always. The Artoria of this night is the first time we see an Artoria who could be free from the mantle of king. However, her arc isn't finished. While certainly an emotional climax being the first embrace, it isn't until later the next day does Artoria's character arc fully finish. This H scene shows the core of Shiro and Artoria's relationship, but Saber still attempts to reject it, the same way she rejects her happiness. It isn't until she sees Shiro reject the Holy Grail when offered the same deal to change the past that hurt him, when a similar soul rejects her path, does she see the error of her way. Now some might argue that my interpretation wasn't intended and that I'm reading a bit too much into it, but I generally don't care because I think it works. Now, don't get me wrong or anything, there's still some funny lines, it's far from perfect, but I believe it adds to the romance, relationship, and explores their lack of self-love and how their love for each other heals them. You know, everything I was just yapping about. It even ties in very well with last episode. I actually really like last episode, despite the fact that it Disney's up the original bittersweet ending. It still manages to keep some of that bitterness, specifically through Shiro. Shiro in last episode without Saber ends up backtracking a bit. Going through a life of self-sacrifice, he starts to become Archer. In fact, I believe Archer is Fate Route Shiro without last episode, though I actually might be wrong about this. And this tough life Saber witnesses is what makes the reunion all the sweeter. After all that struggle, Shiro and Saber are once again brought together as one, and can live a life as complete human beings. It's why last episode calls it the end of a journey and the beginning of a new one in Avalon, which kinda still makes it pretty sad because this is still post-mortem. Well, whatever. It honest to God makes me cry. I fucking love Fate Route and last episode. It is close to being some of my favorite shit from Nasu if it wasn't for Hisui and Kohaku routes. Honestly, it might be Hisui route level. Anyways, enough glazing the single best thing Nasu did post Tsukihime. Well, except maybe making Alice Kuonji, because Alice is so true. You might have noticed something if you've been paying attention so far. I've barely talked about Heaven's Feel, so yeah, let's do that. Unlimited Blade Works and Fate route use sex as an emotional climax to the relationship. While Saber's development isn't completed by it, it's certainly a major turning point. For this reason, both of these routes use the fucking fantastic song Embrace, symbolizing the two embracing and accepting everything about each other. Heaven's Feel never uses Embrace and has fucking very early into the route, including 2 shown sex scenes, one that's just skimmed over. Oh, and the Wet Dream. Let's talk about the Wet Dream real quick. If there's any sex scene in Fate Stay Night where the criticisms really do 100% apply, it's the Wet Dream in Heaven's Feel. Early in the route, Shiro simply just dreams of fucking toe sucker Rin in the ass for like no reason. Like, okay, it's honestly hilarious, but why does this exist? Is it to make Shiro more relatable because he too wants to fuck Rin in the ass? I would never want this removed because it is fucking hilarious with some banger lines like her anus is defenseless and here fuck me from behind being said by Rin. So fucking funny, you should read it. But yeah, I get why people wouldn't like this. Even though I do, it's just so fucking funny. With that out of the way, we can actually talk about what Heaven's Feel does differently. 8 scenes in this route have 2 or so different purposes. The first purpose is intrinsically related to Sakura's trauma and abuse. Okay, so content warning, we're going to talk about sexual abuse. It's important to understand that Sakura is a victim of rape, and that Heaven's Feel not only explores this symbolically through Angra Manyu, representing an unwanted pregnancy, it does it literally by showing and telling us that Shinji most literally rapes his adopted sister. Something to understand is that being raped doesn't inherently make a victim hate sex. In fact, it can turn you hypersexual, and such is the case of Sakura Mato. Sex with Shiro is so good for her because not only is she hypersexual, Shiro is also the only person to ever fuck her consensually. There is actual love between them instead of just a violation. In a sense, the climax of the romance in the previous routes happens way earlier, which allows us to explore the trials and tribulations of the relationship. It's also important to note that Sakura's lack of self-worth is related to her feelings of impurity. Shiro fucking her is him accepting her, telling her it doesn't matter to him. This is why Shiro saying her name is so important to her. He's acknowledging her. There's other interesting things related to how the H scene ties into her abuse, such as the way she leads the intercourse, being the first time she's in control in such a situation. However, we're not going to deep dive like the Saber scene, maybe some other day. This leads to the second purpose of the sex scenes, which is to show the happenings of their relationship. You see, most couples fuck, and multiple times. And for a person like Sakura who has never experienced sex from someone who actually loves her, it's no surprise that she wants to do it continuously. Plus, it serves the literal function of keeping her alive and sane. Sex in this route might not serve the role of a romantic climax, but it's just as important because it's still essential to show how the relationship develops. For that reason, Embrace is never used, because the true romantic climax is at the end of the route, when Shiro sacrifices everything, even his own ideals, to save Sakura. He even sacrifices my girl Saber, man. I'm gonna cry. I quite like Heaven's Feel's use of sex, and it seems like this is the one route where most people seem to accept the sex scenes as okay. Personally, I actually think Fate route does it best, as I explained earlier, but, you know, it's done well in Heaven's Feel as well. Definitely not done poorly. The only route whose sex scenes feels off is Unlimited Blade Works, mostly because of how oddly awkward and bad at sex Shiro and Rin are. Though in some way it's fitting, and it's also the start of a new relationship. I mean, they are both virgins. Saber and Shiro are a doomed couple, and Sakura and Shiro are already a couple throughout Heaven's Feel. Shiro and Rin are the only ones whose future is in the air, so the awkward uncomfortable scene in Unlimited Blade Works sorta works, especially in combination with the Hollow Ataraxia Rin H scene, which I do actually think is really well done. I will also note that on replaythrough I was able to recognize some symbolism somewhat similar to the Fate route sex scene. Despite that, I'd still call this scene pretty flawed. So now that I've been talking about the H scenes for quite a bit, let's quickly discuss the censored versions. At this point, I've talked quite extensively about what I like and think works about these H scenes. And fundamentally, that is what I wanted to do. This is a defense of the H scenes, not a critique of the censored ones. But I think it's worth to discuss why the censored scenes don't achieve the same things, you know, as a point of comparison. I'll talk about 3 of them. The Fate route final H scene replacement, the Limited Blade Works route replacement, and one of the Heaven's Feel replacements, but they're all pretty similar except the Wet Dream replacement. Starting off with Saber's, I actually don't think the censored version is that bad, but it still falls short of what the H scene achieves. The theme of Artori opening up for one night and the romantic purpose of the scene still exists through their cute little sleepover. It certainly does come off as sanitized as it removes any of the carnal, lustful parts of love, which I honestly have quite a lot of distaste for, since one of the things I appreciate about Eroge games is their exploration of this more raw aspect of love. But it at least achieves the bare minimum it has to. However, it loses any of the symbolism and emotional and physical connection that the actual sex scene has. This scene is too simple, too pure, and too short to match any of the exploration of the characters the actual H scene has. It fundamentally is just an extended version of the post-sex scene, and if it were just that, I'd like the scene fine enough, as it has some nice moments that reinforce the themes of Saber and Shiro's romance, with no subtlety, mind you. But as a replacement, it's missing a lot of what makes the original so good. Moving on to Tosaka's replacement scene, this one is actually very interesting. In many ways, it's the opposite of the Saber replacement scene. While Saber's keeps the romance but removes the depth of the emotional and physical connection, Tosaka's removes the romance but keeps the connection through transferring the magic crest, which literally combines the mind, body, and soul. Whoa, I brought it up again! Holy shit! This scene is honestly really cool and is great at strengthening their bond through Shiro seeing Tosaka's memories. Instead of combining symbolically through sex, they literally fuse together when they do the transferring. But sadly, the lack of the truly romantic aspect is what hurts it. Unlimited Blade Works already has the least explored romance. Removing their first night of intimacy weakens it even further. I do actually like this scene, but it still falls short of achieving what even one of the weakest H scene manages. Finally, we have Sakura's censored scene. Oh god. Which is horrible. Sakura's story of abuse is explicitly tied to sex. Her feelings of impurity are related to her not being a virgin. She is denied truly romantic intercourse in exchange for pure violation, up until Shiro accepts her for who she is, regardless of what happened to her. Her being a vampire and sucking his blood does not even come close to reaching this. It's so lazy and honestly disrespectful to deny Sakura her chance of truly making love by having her bite Shiro's finger. What in the actual fuck is this shit? I was honest to God pissed reading it. Oh, sure, it does to some extent represent Sakura's insecurities. She feels like a bad person for wanting his blood, but this is so fucking tame that it misses the goddamn point. This isn't romantic. This isn't an abuse victim being accepted for the first fucking time. It's a lazy way of removing sex because I guess it's icky. Anyways, let's talk a little bit about some of my personal flaws with the scenes, so it's not all positive, and wrap up this video about why King Arthur giving a Japanese guy head is deep. She sucks on my dick, as if to guide my cum that's trying to escape. That's just one of the many hilarious lines you'll eventually get desensitized to when reading Nasu's sex scenes. The one criticism that I just cannot deny is that these scenes can be hilariously goofy. It mostly comes down to Shiro's inner monologue and thoughts. There are just so many bad lines. It's great. Even my beloved Fate Roots H scene has its set of bad lines. Like the one I started off with, that's from the Fate Route H scene. Yeah, they're in all of them. I'll at least say that Shiro does not come off nearly as bad at sex and rapey as Shiki. You know, maybe that's because Shiki actually rapes in his story, but whatever. I can completely understand not being able to take these scenes seriously for that very reason. From funny ways to refer to your penis to Ren's bisexual awakening in a fucking abandoned shed, Fate sure knows how to make me laugh. And it all mostly comes down to this awkward sort of clunky writing around these scenes. It feels like Nasu is uncomfortable, and I don't know if that's just how he writes H scenes or if it's a translation. Oh, and don't get me wrong, there's thousands of examples of hilarious sex scenes in Western literature as well. I'm sure if you go, I don't know, on book Twitter or book TikTok or wherever the fuck they talk, you could find someone posting some funny lines. Due to the taboo around sex in modern culture, it's hard to nail. This still doesn't excuse Nasu though, because he really did not need to be this funny. Ultimately though, despite these issues of awkward writing, I still think these scenes are worthwhile. As I said, I understand why it would turn someone off, and if this is supposed to be porn, it's not very good at it. However, I want people to engage with scenes instead of just writing them off as cringe without thinking about them critically. Nasu he definitely sucks at writing sex, but he wrote his stories around it. It's very possible he didn't think about any of the shit I just yapped about. but I really don't mind that, because I see meaning in these cringe, stupid ass, funny, goofy scenes, and I hope I manage to get someone to at least think about them differently, and I'd love to see more discussion around the H scenes in general. In conclusion, sex in Fate Stay Night, despite its issues, has a place, works, and can be emotionally potent. Basically, I'm for fucking. So Nasu, let's give you another shot. You matured, you can probably write way better H scenes now. So I'm thinking, an Alice Sojiro sex scene in Mahoyo 2? Maybe give a shout out to the lesbian sex. I mean, the scene in the shed was pretty fucking funny. Please give me a Toko H scene, she's so bad. Ah!